Non-citizens arresting American citizens? What the heck am I talking about? I had a subscriber reach out and ask about California Senate Bill 960, which is a new law that allows non-citizens to become police officers, and got passed last year, but LAPD in particular found themselves in a little bit of a bind when it came to a federal law. So I reached back out to Ken Roybal. He's been on the channel before, and he is the host of the Police Applicant Podcast. He knows a lot about this law and has talked about it a lot. Let's get right into it to not only learn more about it, but also what could the future hold regarding other police departments taking on non-citizens as police officers. Ken, based on what you've done through your background work, but also learned about the fine print and ever-evolving laws, back in maybe 2023, I can't remember what year, California adopted Bill 960. So what is it and how does it affect law enforcement hiring practices?
To just open this up, it's important to note that Senate Bill 960 in California was passed in early 2023, and it allows non-citizens to become police officers. And I believe that it was really targeted towards DACA recipients, but it's important to note that it doesn't allow people in the country illegally to work. But that doesn't mean that this is an okay bill. And of course, California is going to do what they're going to do. The whole thing about it is that this bill circumvents federal law. And it's not only California, Colorado, New Jersey all passed this same similar law that allows people who are non-citizens to work as police officers. But there's things that people don't know about this. You can't just go, hey, a non-citizen, you can now be a police officer. It doesn't work like that. There's some caveats to all this.
Do you mind diving into some of that fine print?
Yeah. If someone's in the country legally, they have the right to work. If they have, and I'm going to get this correct, they can work with full federal legal work status, which includes having a green card, a visa, asylum seekers, and DACA recipients. Those people can legally work in the United States. Here's the problem. If you're legal to work in the United States, why did they have to make this special carve out as a law so people could become police officers? So way in the back when, people who were non-citizens have always been able to apply to be police officers. The thing with that is in the past, you could apply to be a police officer as long as you were already in the citizenship process. Then if you got hired, I think it was 2 or 3 years, you had to become a police officer. If you didn't get your citizenship within those 2 or 3 years, you weren't a police officer anymore.
Interesting.
So here we come up with a new law. How can we get people who aren't citizens to become police officers? So we passed this law in these different states like California that says they can become police officers. The reason they do that is because it circumvents federal law. One of the things is that LAPD got in trouble for this, not in trouble, but they caught themselves in a little bit of a bind because they had hired 5 DACA recipients. They were in the academy early this year. I can't remember exactly what it was. So they were already hired. And then somebody comes along, foreign police recruits. They said, because of Senate Bill 960, you can now be a police officer. So they hire them, they do the whole thing, do background checks on them and everything. They're already in the academy, set to graduate. Someone comes along and says, hey, LAPD, did you know that if you are not a U.S. citizen, you cannot possess a firearm by federal law? You can't even buy ammunition. So LAPD comes out and they go, okay, let's work on that. So what they did was they came out, LAPD thinks on it and they go, oh boy, we really got ourselves in a bind right now. How can we fix this? So in California, police officers are technically peace officers 24 hours a day. If you're off duty and you take a police action and you get hurt, it's injury on duty, it's workers' comp, you're now on duty. Also in California, you can go out of your jurisdiction all the way to the border of Oregon or Arizona or wherever. You still have peace officer status throughout the entire state. DACA recipients aren't peace officers 24/7. So what they decided to do was they had to leave their firearms at the station when they left work. So what does LAPD do? Go, how do we get around this? Oh, I know. What we'll do is we'll make a special carve out for these DACA recipients where they're on duty 24 hours a day. Because if they're on duty 24 hours a day, they can carry their guns off duty, just like real police officers. So that's one thing.
What a bind.
It is, because they did this. They hired these DACA recipients before they go, that's against federal law, right? You can't carry a gun. They even have in the military, they have a pilot program where they had like 500 military, the people that were enlisted in the military, there's about 500 as a pilot program where they could carry firearms and things like that. But it wasn't the whole military. Even in the military, if you got out of the military, you still weren't eligible to possess a firearm if you were not in the country as a U.S. citizen. And so that's a pilot program on the federal side. The reason that they get away with this Scott, is because it takes the federal government, the DOJ, to sue a state. Federal government under the current administration isn't going to sue a state because they're violating federal law. And so here's another thing about it. DACA recipients. The DACA status is still in court. It's bounced around like a ping pong. They can't figure it out. They can't come up with a final resolution for it. So you hire these DACA recipients to become police officers, and down the road, the court says, nah, you can't be here. They're not going to be police officers anymore. So the cities that hire DACA recipients, they're just taking a chance. And the LAPD chief at the time, he said, well, we're believing that the courts will do the right thing. Oh, well, okay, I guess.
Wow. I didn't even think about that. Let me ask you this regarding your work as a background investigator. Someone's coming from another country. They're not a citizen yet. Like, how does that even start? Like the background process?
Yeah. So there's two parts to that. Say, for instance, like I said, they really did this for the DACA recipients. Most of the DACA recipients were here since they were babies or kids. Okay. So most of the records are out here. But you are correct. If somebody did come as a 17-year-old or something like that, or even a 20-year-old, you go, hey, other country, we got to check with the employments. We got to check with every police agency, do all the records checks and things like that. You're not going to get that stuff. So in answer to your question, if somebody comes from out of the country and they somehow get grandfathered in, they get legal status to work here, you can't do a background because you're not going to get that information. So,
and we're really going to need that if you're applying to be a police officer. That's
the meat and potatoes of background investigation. Isn't that true? What's the whole purpose of doing a background investigation for police officers? It's risk management. You're doing the best you can to vet people to make sure they're not going to go out and do all kinds of bad things. That's the whole purpose, to evaluate a person's character as far as becoming a police officer. But there is another couple of things that people need to know about hiring non-citizens. One, non-citizens working patrol can suspend the civil rights of a U.S. citizen during just a traffic stop. Your Fourth Amendment rights. If a police officer stops you, Fourth Amendment, they're suspending your right to travel freely. Imagine a non-citizen stopping a citizen and said, no, you can't move. That's like one of those things where you go, well, that doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem very right at all. Here's another thing that people don't think about. So just take LAPD, for instance. They say, okay, we're going to make these guys police officers 24/7. Never mind that, am I on overtime? Do I get paid 24 hours a day? Because this is a special rule. So let's say that one of the DACA recipients, they have a rule that they can carry a gun now 24 hours a day off duty, and they get in a shooting and a person gets seriously hurt. And someone says, the only reason this non-citizen was able to shoot me was because LAPD gave them a special right to carry a gun in violation of federal law, and I got shot because of it. What happens then?
That's something to consider.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what you think about how this will unfold.
With the new administration coming in, they could very well sue California or somebody else.
True.
Definitely, it would come to a head if something tragic happened and these states that just decide that they're going to write their own laws that don't correspond to federal law, and then they get themselves in a pinch, just like LAPD and LASD did, where they do this thing because it's just the coolest thing to do, and then they find out, yeah, your guys can't carry guns and they can't buy ammunition, so they can't have guns when they're not police officers. And so,
well, Ken, I do appreciate it. You've already been on my channel before, and I'd like to have you back again we'll find something to talk about. For those who maybe have more questions about the background process, how can they find information and how can they get in touch with you?
They can go to my website, policebackground.net, and they can also, I encourage people to go to just Google the Police Applicant Podcast, and we're going into season 5, and there's all kinds of information for people that want to be cops.
So there you have it. I appreciate Ken coming back onto the channel. When it comes to this topic, you may agree, you may disagree with that Senate bill. The point is to have conversation about it, and I'm glad the subscriber asked me to do a video about it. I look forward to talking to you again in another video. Go ahead and click right here, and let's make that happen.